Scale Tom Barry.
What sets Tom Barry apart as a combat commander is his attitude towards leading men and towards battle and towards death and killing.
This was the only fighting that suited people facing one of the greatest empires in the world.
Wounded men and surrendered men were killed. He is a much more aggressive, much more determined, you could say ruthless activist, fighter, soldier than the average IRA man, I think.
Tá na líomhantaí ordig sé básaí siú de géal dó, a bagartar chlú is inscéal an General Tom Barry. Finscéal a chruthig sé leistig den mlíon in a raibh sé in I cheanara cholún ratha na trasbrigaide íorthar chorcaí.
Well, duine des na cineirí bochomasaí a gogan na sír se bethé agus gan áras bíon duine bochachtaí gón de chorcaí áid a bhíanach níomfach ar fad I gogan na sír se.
Is an mí scéal ann faoi, ach sí míad a Ryan a riamh scéal a bheithe.
The man that I had thought was ruthless, cold-blooded, but he was also a kind, a generous man. He had a mixed, I suppose, personality, but he had a commanding personality.
Rugh Tom Barry a gúnta chéirí in 1897, mac chun san RIC. Ceire bliana I raig, trégan an tathir uine an rí, chun gnó a oscailt in na bhailligúchais, Ross O'Garbra, Conte Chorcaí. Boscaláir a cliste agus sugan muinteoir tagas go breise dó. Ní I gcúrsaí acadúil amháin, ach a gcúrsaí an tríl freisin. Bhágan teilech go dríthad na boundan. Baile mór garastóin a raibh cáil na dílseachta lean a chuid scaíochta ann.
And school days, I could name every king and queen of Britain, but I knew nothing about any of our own past people because it was definitely excluded from all schools. At that time, I had no conception of Irish nationality.
Glach Barry skilling an rí in 1850 le ling an chugig mhuir. Lonnie an na huirish gvílata an barach in Mesopotamia baul, áit na bhaca sé fógra faoi éirí amach na casca cor a dúmpócha héal bun os ciún.
I would have been at the time about 18. I wondered what it was all about. And it told of the executions of men whose names I never had heard. Clark, Pierce, Connolly.
Bhí an barracks in Egypt nuair a bhlas Sinn Féin olbhua a dábhachán 1980. Nefsblachas na hhéireann na bháin a hás ó chiad.
Agus thugann pártaí sin le tuiscint go sa léir rim ré go raibh sé geisteachá cócht na breataine in éireann a bhrise aontlí a béidir.
Ach níor líg an bhreatain cás nefsblachas na hhéireann chlár chógáil fáras. Crinú na gochtaí móra a dachrathaigh teorin íor chagaigh na Heorpa. Má dag an coga ceir a chócht scrista, bhí impreacht na breataine a tacht faoi bhrú freisin.
All commanders and intelligence officers
Pescéile, níor mhór meas na breataine éireann, ná Sinn Féin.
that all Sinn were murderers or sympathized with murder. Judged by English standards, the Irish are a difficult and unsatisfactory people. Their civilization is different, and in many ways lower than that of the English. They're entirely lacking in the Englishman's distinctive respect for the truth.
Is soil an greibh an tuairim sin coitianta san éohíisteag agus a dús na féohíise an tuairim greibh na hairnig le bhéal íseal síbhéalteachta agus gur dream anna chasta.
When I came back from the First World War, there was the arrogant actions of British Army throughout the country.
Gawagay féin tógach isteach go dtíon bharric an rithim na boundané agus trúgach drohíide dó, agus bhí anachráin ar fad agéad an Regiment Essex in Asian.
They got their share of terrorism in West Cork, and civilians were beaten and shot up, and they were not alone by the Tens and the Argosies, but by regiments like the Essex.
Lár nédiag fihe, rinne Barry Tagavail le IRA grihad na bandam. Má bhí áras ar a faoi, chuidir a mondre alla mar sin féin.
Single fire!
We hadn't transport, we hadn't arms or ammunition enough, but we did finish up an organised, disciplined force.
Right face!
And with a strength of 100 guerrillas, you can take anything if you have them properly deployed.
I mí ar a fáil, Cinan Barry agus Charlie Hurley, ifigach ceannis na brigaide, an bretheh sílí a bhí andíon ar fríosúnig a awl bharú. Réitiad ar dúlgus las muid dá óstán am lepan. Ní a bheith an bretheh sílí a tháinig chun na faoin óige áfach. Bhí tara únsathe an IRA an RIC. Thosaigh sroth leanúnach fearr ag éirí as an fórsa. Chuir an bhreatain dúchrónaigh agus auxiliaries íor haidúrí mar fólíní paramínata chun an IRA a scris. Chris countlach sin an auxiliaries má cramtha mílúnasa nídiag feather. Hoppig Barry, deis starúil in a Gwynedd.
For 4 or 5 Sundays, these fellows came, 2 lorries, sometimes 3 lorries.
They'd been patrolling aggressively out of Macroom since September of that year, and they were gaining a reputation of invincibility.
Bhí údarás Tom Barry cholún rahan na trasbrigaide buan fan drása. Chin sé na auxiliaries a únsaí bhóthar gúlta idir bhachramtha is dún mánmhaí, in áit a dúchtar Kilmichael.
This position was not an ideal ambush position, and the column were told that these guys wouldn't take any prisoners, and either the flying column would win or they'd be wiped out.
Heads down, everyone. And no one moves till the fire commences.
Tar éis mar seáilíthe, Chris an colún ratha Kilvihí le bracán le an dánach an tochtó láfihid sauna nídiag fithe. Leag Barry an líachán idir gá chasa. Ran óga héan, deithnúr fachas an carige chun tuairt faoin chéad lorry. Ran óga dó, téfír de charigelle siar beagán chun daileáil leis an dara lorry. Ran óga trí in gá le, seachtar fás gá carigacha trasan an bmhóthir, séisir fá hacht fórsa dhéana. Tá Barry san anad ceannis trúr fearr lena chais.
Nothing like it had been seen before. That's one of the things that made it so very prominent and striking in the history of the revolution. To choose the spot he did, which was quite open and barren, so they didn't have a clear way to escape if things went wrong. But on the other hand, it was where the British weren't expecting them. They were very close to the road.
Ag líon na gréine dógur scoutaí teachtan náhaint, gálarí 9 uair in gach ceann díal. Has Barry amach os cóir an chéadlarí colla ifigach in óglaigh na hhéireann nach chahfaige, bhuilig an tamánaí.
The fight then became more or less a hand-to-hand fight. It was a bloody fight, it was a bitter fight, a savage fight. But eventually, 9 of the Aggies lay killed on the road.
Tar éis daile leis an ciad lorry, tháinig Barry chun taú le ran ó go dó, fós i mé an chatha le Aggies an dara lorry.
I heard these fellas shouting, "We surrender, we surrender." We saw them, some of them throw their rifles away. And when they did, 3 of this section stood up. The Aggies opened fire. They killed 2 of them after surrendering. We dropped, and I gave the order to fire. And I shouted, "Keep firing, and don't stop till I tell you."
An sin harig na auxiliaries an dara géile.
I only regretted one thing, and I'm speaking now almost 45 years after it, and it was that I hadn't warned these men of this false surrender trick. We took their arms, took their ammunition, took their notes. We left them their money and their brandy flasks, and we pulled them away, and we set fire to their 2 lorries just as it was getting dark.
Thug Barry an ancient céanna sin gomininic, agus dailsigh sé é ina leabhar mór ratha, Guerilla days in Ireland, leabhar a rinne leacht an marach. Le menachim Bégan agus Ho Chi Minh agus bhíoh sé as stadéir i Sandhurst agus a West Point. Coige blian aig ceistítar ancient Barry I leabhar eile. Credan an starry Peter Hart, go raibh sé riantin ag Barry ó hús, na auxiliaries a glan amach, agus ná a bheith an chlasé an géile bregach.
What I say in my book is that there was no false surrender as Tom Barry claimed there was. That is to say, as a trick. I'm pretty sure that didn't happen.
Tá cosa fós faoi of Peter Hart.
This is barbarous.
Chuir Kilmichael Ambush an reachtan, seachtar déag marv.
It is notorious that guerrilla warfare is almost invariably barbarous, and that had the IRA fought on more regular lines and informed bodies, they would have suffered far heavier casualties and achieved far less success.
Their most elite element had been totally defeated by people they were representing as bandits, as peasants, as murderers. So the propaganda side of this was deeply damaging. Moreover, they were goaded, I suppose, inevitably into a significant counter-reaction. The declaration of martial law in Cork on the 10th of December led within 2 days to the sacking and looting and burning of much of the commercial heart of Cork City.
My darling mother.
Níor chuir scris cartgaí lúchair chuile bhreatanach. I litir dá bháthir mar seo hiscrí auxiliary amháin.
During the burning and looting of Cork, in all my life and in all the tales of fiction I've read, I've never experienced such orgies of murder, arson and looting as I've witnessed during the past 16 days with the RIC auxiliaries. It baffles description, and we're supposed to be the officers.
Chuir an dlí míleta isteach héal na naoine. Cuireadh coscar glúisteáin, rothair agus cumáin fiú. Fógraíomh éanaigh faoi Hermes freisin. An muir Bernard Montgomery barascail macad a cailúil an dara chugadanda a hínig an ceanse. Chra Kilmichael an príomhheire Lloyd George a dehan gur 8 míleta a bhí ann. Bhí na gaiir chugaigh, lithe den íal. Fui hús nídiag fithe hean, hí an 3 mílete a tanna an IRA. Gawag na céta óglach in iarthar charcaí, lávach líon nar bheag eile.
Many of our men had been murdered while prisoners, and not alone murdered by the Essex, but they had been tortured. And I will not state here the nature of the torture because it is too revolting in many cases.
Fasnéis a rinne an difríochta der bathe agus bás. Bhí ólas crín ascethe dóir sí an rí ag daoine sa phobal túile bhí glan in aig an IRA. Der Barry in a leabhar go bhfuair séisteach a deach rinne a raibh enim an bhrachadóra
Finished, I tell you.
Colla meascathe agus baré á chahaige. Cheap an ferrimóir go má auxiliary é.
There wouldn't be a shinner left around here if you had acted on all those names I'd given you. They would be finished, I tell you.
Well, I say you're wrong. Because I'm Tom Barry.
Quite a number of what was called the ascendancy were informers. And they were far more dangerous because they had intelligence and they weren't receiving money and they believed in what they were doing.
The best way to defeat a popular army like the IRA is to gain intelligence on their personnel, on their armed stock, on their intentions. That is absolutely normal. The way to counter that is to discourage people from dealing with the enemy. And unfortunately, it is common to all such insurgencies that those who inform are dealt with severely.
The IRA, as far as they're concerned, have a big menu of people they think are informing, and often they were wrong. And we know from British intelligence, the IRA often killed the wrong people. Sometimes they killed the right people, sometimes they killed the wrong people.
Der hart go a hargaid éasca iad seo, iar haidúri, firsúil agus protestúnig. Der Barry go a chatiliigh mór of mór díobh a lavacach.
There were no more shot because they were Protestants or because they were Jews or because they were atheists or because they were anything else. They were shot because we had in their own confession that they were doing the job.
Bhí tora warú na mrachadóri, agus bhí an colún ratha ag éirí dáma a ríis. Chuir Barry teachtareacht chuig an Mair Percival, Regiment Essex in Rihud na Boundan, a rá go a hargaidí a chuid fearr de lo is díthe bídís faoi arm, nó a bhanart.
The IRA in West Cork were aggressive. We followed them into town, we fought them in towns, and they were harassed all the time there.
A ríis is a ríis eile an barach de sac buine isteach lo in Rihud na Boundan dúnfort an náid. We were now hard, cold, and ruthless as our enemy. The British were met with their own weapons. They'd gone down in the mire to destroy us and our nation, and down after them we had to go. Mar Ashuragra, Sholav na mílte trúpi an nartathe go chunta Chorcaí. Is léir go raibh fasnéis ag arm na Breataine faoi cholún ratha mór bailithe idir Rihud na Boundan agus Ciún Táille, deagraigh siad táin ina chuine. Chúla Barry faoin blean agus bhogan colún lála páraigh nídiaag fiche an go Cross Barry idir Rihud na Boundan agus Cahir Chorcaí.
Bhí an caspóra ag na Bhreatanig I Grosabarrig chun circula éanamh timpeall na Hóglaigh, Barrigus na Hóglaigh, agus an sin iad a scris amach.
The scouts came in to report lights of lorries, noises, dogs barking, and all the other signs that troops were moving against us.
Hangadurs na táinte, míle gáchéad saidúr a Rihud na Boundan, Ciún Táille, Corcaigh, Ballion Cholig agus Má Chramha.
Barry realised he had at most 104 men at his disposal and very little ammunition. in the range of 35 to 40 rounds per man that would not permit a drawn-out engagement.
Leag Barry a rhwpi amach in a seacht rannog. An chéad trí fá hef an bhóthir agus I ngá chlós ferime. Glach rannog a ceathir an tard os ciún drihid Cross Barry. Rannog a coig har an cynnig mar chúl garda. Cymad sé rannog a sé sa glúiste agus chosin rannog a seacht clí hán an íorthir.
The Benman contingent, which were the hated Essex, were the first to come into us, and we were quite happy about that.
Gwn denomatína mar sin, hína sasanig bhriste, hína sin tréna chéile. Cuidig come marv, agus the rin cuidig eile as an áit.
Thug Barry peabre leis sa chalún, hiag sé go gapach na Breatanig go regiment le peabre a bhí an machara rompa, seachas fórsa beag.
All the lorries were abandoned, and our chaps rotted out in the road. Some of them broke down through the fields here, away to the south.
An barach féin sa tóir I dosach buine.
By decisively attacking one element of that cordon and bursting through them, he did exactly what any irregular commander should do.
Fórsaí na boundon in a réan maime, bhí gáchéad trúpaí a dridimir híomh an IRA ag drithid Cross Barry.
The amount of ammunition we had was roughly 35 rounds to the rifle. We had some bombs, and we had a couple of mines with us. These were landmines.
Ach níor phléascan bhain. Agus Maria giniltóir an chalúin ag iarigé a choirú, duine den ceathrar IRA a caiileag an láise. Bégan comrádaí a tháinig chun fórithint ar a hábháil faoi ris rán piléir. Hábháil ranóg glúiste an IRA an lá agus chúlaigh trúpaí na Breataine. Daibrig an bhaim faoi dhearra agus sa rúile buile a lean dúirdigh Barry dá chuid fearr tarraingt siar chun na háda. Le bhíle ar hiúl tug an ranóg a chuig Tom Kelleher dúláán únsaí ón chúl.
Bhí Tom Kelleher maithair ann I gceannas, agus bhíidir Park an Caisleán, bhí Sean Caisleán fóthracha ann. Chur Kelleher bert des na óglaigh isteach san fóthracha.
Bhíidir faoi ordú gan scuile go bhfeicidís súile an náid. San onnaitse is sé hit an líonas mó saidúr Breatainach an láisin. Tá rééis cúpla uair a chloig, bhain an taire an talamh ardamach, áit ar heper rúpaí bhá cromtha an dul a cheangal. Leag Barry an colún amach chun trí ris scoire chathmh le na trúpaí híos fuatha.
They scattered and broke, and that was the last of the troops we saw at Crossbarry.
One particular British inquest suggested at least 10 were killed, which is more than they admitted at the time. The level of capture of weaponry and the level of eyewitness testimony from the IRA would suggest that far more than 10 were killed, possibly as many as 30, and some suggest even more than that.
Léirigh sé chomhdachar sa bhí sé an bua áil ar an IRA. Tuis go raibh sé geisteach na fórsaí gháil timpeall ar na hóglaigh agus breithartha ach ní mar sin a hitteach.
Chamáin Barry ar aig, le únsaí ar bharric RIC Ross Carberry, caiicís in I dhéag sin. Caillag bert cholta den RIC agus bhíthara an baile a réigint. Ach bhí lón chugaigh gán fud fad na tíre agus súile sascóric ag an dáhéhan is. Glí an cuileánach Barry go Blacklia chun neart an aira a bheas dó féin is de éman de Valera. A bhealach a bhaile, ceistí a bheith ag buan den Regiment Essex in aiceil I ddrithid na bandan.
Don't you bloody move! Don't move! Get! What's your name?
Ted Ryder, sir. I'm a medical student.
Ligantar gur Maclean leiise bhí ann, cé tháinig in a láthir ach an trámlaí bhó dá raibhige. An muir A.E. Percival, ifigach Canis, an Essex.
I see.
Percival in Bandon, he was a ruthless killer of captured, unarmed IRA men.
Release him.
Clear off.
Is am I prain dáile héad onar élig Barry. Bhí líon farsing óglach goffa ag na Bretainnig fannachtanis chuirt arm.
We had enough of our men being murdered, and when unarmed especially, we didn't mind men being killed in action, and we decided to take the Earl of Bandon as a hostage. This was some weeks before the truce.
Gáwadar an ceathrú iarla bhandan mar gíal, lasrí cúnta na héireann san án. Bheoch a bheithe mar scia don na príosúnig poblachtacha. Chuir Barry íochail an iarla litir a scríchuig Lloyd George, ná ág an príomhhara dail inting an bharrig.
There you are. The British were told in the letter that if one of our men were executed, that Bandon would hang from the nearest telegraph pole.
You'll be safe as long as they don't try a rescue. And remember, if they come, the first bullet is for him.
Chuir de Valera Leslie Price ó Ias, gníomhíoch a goman amán chun túrisc lasa Lord Bandon a ire.
Look, all we need is
Ní bheoch lámh ag an matin in éan sascóric, muna raibh an tíorla slán.
Lord Bandon is safe anyway?
Bandon is fine. Sure, he's playing cards with the lads. He's better fed than ourselves. Look, he'll come to no harm as long as our lads don't. They know that very well, and Bandon knows it.
Hit Leslie Price agus Tom Barry in Grá. Grá a bhair fad sail na berte.
They weren't even their main house.
Tháinig blá an rá nuair a fós Leslie agus Tom a mí lúnasa, mí isteach sa toscóric. Ba ócáid hóisialta de bliana an uair dhearrig go hasach de Valera agus Collins agus maithe eile na réamhlóide mar chum rádathe le chéile san éan láthir a bháin. Síníomh an conra an séolá nullag lúná sásta a bhí Barry leis.
Ní réantaigh sé éair leis an gríchealt. Chomá leis sin bhí sé anna láidir gcuine an bhóid díalseachta bhí le tógant ag build an dáil, an dúirte gur léirigh an bhóid díalseachta gur pobla faoi choisiad na héirnig.
Glach an dáil leis an conra le mór of beag. Bhí formhór an IRA na chuine agus Don Barry im le clia ag irid cog a carga a chachid. Don na gunaí in na dost. Ach le Barry aspaile, hála drochabar in íorthar chorcaí. Maríomh óglach a bhriseteach a deachrátastúnach tugad an ratin. I mart díaltais, Marí a bheith féin amach agus í saidúra a bhí sa teach leo. An dá ihe dargiún lábhachag deithnúir protestúnach eile in nún máin bhuí agus na dúthaí siar.
Who is it?
Is réigen a luamh na dún bharatha seo go dtí gur thug Peter Hart chun solas in I leabhraíod ceithre bliain ar aghaidh. Mar iad trúr diag, mar ba protestúnaigh iad, dar leis.
Some of them clearly were opponents of the IRA. Some were known as unionists or loyalists, definitely, but others weren't. So they were very much a mixed bag. And I think that's why it's important, if you want to say, well, why these particular people were killed, then you have to say, well, what do they have in common is Protestantism.
Haring na dún bharatha cáine for lehan, sa dáil agus a gcóirlaí chunta agus bhailte chorcaí le mór of mór ag poblachtaí únta.
I think it's very important to differentiate between those who may be in Church of Ireland and those who are identified as active loyalists. There was an enormous difference.
Part of the reason why this happened, I think, is the belief that there was a kind of loyalist underground operating, an anti-Sinn Féin society, something of that sort. And these people were maybe somehow involved or supported it. Now, there's no evidence for that.
In the south, the Protestants and those who supported the government rarely...
I gápéisí breitanacha, luamh díolseoirí protestúnacha I gcomharsanach na boundan, a bhí ag obair ar san an rí.
This rule was in the Bandon area, where there were many Protestant farmers who gave information. Although the intelligence officer of this area was exceptional...
Imacht na auxiliaries as dún máin bhuí, dá gifigach an leabhar seo nótaí in I dhéag. Listed an IRA a balia go bhrachadóirí, Catholicaigh agus protestúnaigh a raon. I gápéisí eile, luag protestúnaigh a dún bharíod in Oibreán nídiúg 22.
I saw these documents. There was a list of helpful citizens and a list of, there were many things in it. There was quite a considerable haul, as it were.
Ach bhí scáil na poblachta mar cheart ag gach saoránach, bhí na dún bharatha do chosanta. Dil Barry faoi effar a bhaile le ósaí an IRA in íorthar chorcaí. Deisiad or ordú míleata daghuid fearr, a bagart an bháis féin mar finos ar éon óglach a chuireadh isteach ar winter na haite.
The IRA was not at any point determined to wipe out Protestants or anything like that. And I never said that, and I do not think it's true.
Ach is mar se lena sa críochnaíonn an chabadil sin I leabhar Hart. The nationalist revolution had also been a sectarian one. Péra the bhí ar intinige, nascan Peter Hart líochán Chilmhaíl I mína saoin nídiúg 20 le dún bharún na protestúnach in Oibreán nídiúg 22. These deaths can be seen as the culmination of a long process of social definition which produced both the heroes of Kilmichael and the victims of the April massacre.
Even the British intelligence officers based in Dublin Castle and based in London did not make any serious attempt to characterise the War of Independence as having any sectarian dimension. It simply would not have made any sense. There were far too many leading Protestants within the Republican forces.
Níl dowdach gur díal náire gur raibh an seachtasachas I measc na gúiseanna ar lábhachag protestúnaigh in Oibreán nídiúg 22. Bhain stigmas dar uil leis an mrachadóir freisin. Well, buint ag an dag in éisian leis an tost a clúdaigh na nún bharatha son harnimníanta.
The Republicans decided that they wouldn't talk about informers or spies because there were families who know nothing about the underground activities of their relatives, and for harmony in the area and for stability, they decided they wouldn't talk about it anymore, and that they left it at that.
Nuair a bhrisin cogad cathair gamach, ní ra bhéin cheist faoi díolteacht Tom Barry. Faoi chligáin na ngonaí móra, gléiste mar bhean, gáige is sleána bhuisteachs na ceithre cuairteanna ceann cheathrú na bhórsaí faoi chonartha.
He went into the forecourts and he was the first prisoner of the Civil War. He went in dressed as a nurse and they captured him.
Cuireadh Barry go chompa géimhin a bhí fós á thógáil a mbaile Vic Gormain. Chompa nua chun na mílta cólta faoi chonartha an IRA a imtheoranú.
I opposed the treaty and I fought against it. We had it very tough. We were called the irregulars, but we were the people that stood for the independence of our country and for nothing else.
Bhí bailach éilethe á chuirdeach ag Barry ó leag sé cos sa champa. Leistigh de gá uair a clígán dó, hapigh sé a dheis. A rís eile ar a cimad, dornán dá hena cholún rathe lena chos. Glach Barry á heilimh ar bhailte íorthar chorcaí.
The hóg sé an garasún in Bialahainin agus in Iscéan. The chuig sé raige dí an leon garab. Dysgris sé an áit an choilchil in Mailafúin agus in Mailafícíre. Bhí maithir ina captéan ar G Company Mailagolda. Hánig sé fé cenas Barry agus deirtar fiú bhain i gúpláid. Nuair a chólan na státarí gur a bheith Barry I bhí anún sí nar cachad a rucar.
Ach tháinig méadú móranis ar Arnam Téirstáit, agus bé policy an réaltais príosúnig poblachtacha a chur chun báis. Bhí Barry is an tairá in omar na hamiléise.
That in the opinion of the executive.
Hinolad ar crinú éig an dála I mí Marta 1923 I bhíana sé éman de Valera. Bhil Barry gur tríd fánach inis a bhí andóibh.
Well, I'd like to support that motion.
We should vote again.
Right, we'll take a vote. Who's in favour? And who's against?
Hit Rún Barry le vóta Liam Lynch.
And I'm also against, so that's defeated.
Lan an sléocht Tamanella.
Bugine practicúile Tom Barry. The frid sé an aid is a ceap sé go raibh seans buchainte go. Ach nuair a chonig sé nach go ródar a cailúint agus nach seans ar be có, the bhol sé láir ag bán go gurfií stoplis.
Well, cogad I chinála ar fada ba seir lí ón chogad a bhí áhridige revision, mar I ré chogan a súise bhí sé díú ar náid ar raibh gráin ag an bobaláid túil ortha. Cé raibh uafás ar fadar nuair a chonig sé an rialtas a chuirdaína chun báis ag an am géana níor bhail leis trid in aig éar nach eile.
An séirstát a bhuaig an cogad catharga, ach ba chuthíoch an tíorheailte I a dahin fós an rí, the phoblachtaigh gín go bhailte mar Tom Barry.
When it was over, only from my marriage I would certainly have emigrated, but I hadn't the price of our fares to get away to America.
A very large proportion of those who fought with him at Kilmichael ended up as permanent residents in the United States of America and other countries.
Don Barry gníomhach san IRA, agus ba bheag a hím I fianna fáil an pártaí nua a tháinig chun cóachta in idiot trúgadó. Bhí scoilt an chogad catharga fós beod an bubble a déist le céad créile an tísigh nua éman de Valera.
For our own home market, and we can provide work for a number of people.
Nuair a scuil Dev an coscar an IRA, chuir glúiseach nua na léntí gorma go láidir ina chuine. Thóg Barry taobh Dev agus ní vada nó go raibh an tairrás na léintí gorma in aircha a chéile. Tar éis rally a gloch na cuilte trán ón amháin chuig léintí gorma i Shellig Barry is a chairde. Bhí Barry inis in OC ar IRA chorcaí, agus ní vada go raibh sé inglec le deimh freisin, toisc a leis go siúd faoi aib na críochailte.
He remained committed to militant Irish republicanism and was heavily involved at all levels of the organisation, including the highest level in the 1930s, and was intermittently involved in the 1940s and the 1950s.
Ach dag lách an Captain Henry Somerville, smaller clú IRA chorcaí fá réim Tom Barry. Ní raibh sé gceiste réir Barry ach Somerville a údach chun brú a chur deimh bheith cinálta leis an IRA. Ach chuir an dúnmharú déistin ar a gcuine. Ceann foirne in idiog 37, Daireach sé as an IRA ar fad do bhar warú síbhéalaigh le ling feachtas an IRA is Sasanna. Ní raibh buint ar bithe leo le ling an darach a go damda.
Thás goin greibh sé anna láidir I gcuine na buamála bhí ar siúl go háirithe nuair a cuireadh saol go náchuoine an mhail.
Ar feadh na tréimhse seo ile, lean Barry ag obair de chomisionéirí chuan chorcaí agus tháinig a fósa le Leslie, sláán trí gach éon phráinn agus cá ina héal míleta.
They had a very happy life. There's a beautiful letter that Barry wrote to Leslie when he was in jail in the 1930s, and he wrote, "I will love you while I live, and afterwards, if it is possible to do so."
Is séimhe a dimig Barry le híis. In idiog 65 nocht sé séad chóra da chéile chóric sa chugad catharga Michael Collins.
And I suppose it's no secret that I fought a civil war against the side. And I never lost my regard for the man because of that. He was the type of man that was a pretty ruthless-minded man, and he had to be in the job he was. And he was, at the same time, a most lovable character.
Ó arm go chéile scrí Barry faoi chugad na Saoirse, ach in erbal na nachadaí thug sé faoi insint níos amláine a thuairt Guerilla days in Ireland. Gan áras bhíoh Barry tharbheith mí hásta le ábhreithinú Peter Hart, a scrí nárimar na agsís éana chéile bréagach mar chlas ag Kilmhail, léamh a thug an dúláin dínsint Tom Barry. Dar le Barry, bhí grúpa auxiliaries a cha uatha a gcuid rifle is scread We Surrender. Nuair a hasan tairrá chun an géile a ghlacha, bharig na auxiliaries bertacha le gunnaí lá. Bin an géile bréagach. Dúirdigh Barry dá chuid fearr cacha thuairt a thuair agus ní ghlacadh sé éon darí géile ó na auxiliaries a bhí fáca.
Keep firing!
I want here and now to take full responsibility that we wouldn't take prisoners after their false surrender and after killing 2 of our men.
Chuireadh éon túrisc faoin líochán nár luigh géile bréagach an dubh riamh Barry.
Tom Barry's initial report, written just after the ambush, doesn't mention a false surrender.
Fuair Hart an chápé seo I Gartlan Asnéis na Bretagne. Túrisc is scrí Tom Barry dír an íg an líochain a deir siad. Níl dáta irthaí ná sinú. Níl am an líochain ná líon na mar a bhí gartíntaí. Ní luitar éon géile fíornú bréagach. Der criticí Hart gur scríbing bhréagachaí.
It's inaccurate in cases of fact, of cases of verifiable fact. And this has led to suggestions that it's either a composite or a forgery of some description.
Nílan íana sin conclúideach ina hananta san ardí a céis faoi cuidas na fáin síile ag thart.
Tá líomhantí háirte bunathe chunta sí heisir nach nenim nóig sé a chrid ag cílmhe híl. Der sé gur chuir sé fear rifle faoi agalamh in 1988. Ní raibhach trodara a bháin ina bheithig an bhliain sin, Ned Young nócha sé bliain aige.
Everybody I talked to were all mentally perfectly competent. And nobody I talked to seemed at all, let's say, incapacitated.
Ach tá mion scríbing tucha faoi bhóid ag mac Ned Young. Ned Young was wheelchair-bound, having suffered a stroke. It made him incapable of giving an interview, having virtually lost the faculty of speech.
What in an affidavit show John Young, na gogun she scamal na hagelevelle a derden she a hog she.
Der hart leis gur chuir sé agalamh ar air an gcliain sé AF in 1989, a dúirt go raibh sé ina scouta ag cílmhe híl. Ach bhí scoutaí illig cílmhe híl marmh, fáin mbliain sin.
There were 3 active scouts who were on the site during the ambush, and the last of those to die was Dan O'Driscoll, and he died in 1967. There were 2 dispatch scouts, and the last of those was Sean Falvey, and he died in 1971.
Be Ned and in the Dernak, I could see Ned Marv. So the Cahak she AF, the Cahak she went as an week.
I can tell you how I came to interview him, and that is that someone I contacted and asked for help introduced me. And then they drove me to the ambush site, and he just showed me where things happened. So I suppose it's possible that this was some sort of hoax and he was a fantasist, but that seems extremely unlikely.
Ach seachas an bheirt sin, Luan Hart trúr seansaidú eile mar hacaíocht á thuairim nach raibh é ana chéile bréagachán. Ní le hart féin a leabhar siad, ach leis an tathair John Chisholm a rinne tape hafada ortha sna seachtaí.
I certainly talked to Father Chisholm, and I listened to the tapes and I took notes.
Ní lach seansaidú a bhain ó Chilmhe Híl na tapena. Der sé gur lábhachug auxiliaries tar éis dóibh géile, ach ní dúirt ciocca thug siad géile bréagach ribhe sin, nó ná dhéan.
And the question is why? If the false surrender is the kind of key moment, so why wouldn't you mention it?
Ní lufa é beidir mar I méal an chatha, ná faca gach duine gur géile auxiliaries áirithe is gur lean cuidéalacha ag trid.
There was confusion, it was dark by this point in time, and there had been a lot of killing and dying. So psychologically, people were very traumatized. And I think in that sense, confusion may have led to the belief that this had been a trick.
Ach in anóin cír thuail dá le héad adamhail, Muan Hart go bhfuil Ancient Barry brac le éigh agus gléann sé political serial killer
There was like a hardcore, whether they were auxiliaries or British Army or IRA, who did a disproportionate share, and I think this is, in fact, this kind of pattern in war in general. And I call them serial killers, which I would take back, but never have I said Tom Barry was a serial killer.
Is dóilm gúil cóthaíoch sela fada bhaint leis an tíospóir seo chomá. Sí sin an chun spóid atásúla fada idir na daoine a chreideann go láidir sa léachas sa bhain le cogan na saoirse, agus na starathe a bhína dul siar an achtaí agus ag éirigh an Rómán súlacht a bhaint den achtra. Nis deire is dóilm gúil go leor daoine ann a chreideann gúil an bonfuointe caiilte fad ag na starathe.
Faoi scail chuimhlint thuaisceart éireann, duine gabhra henóchas naidach an ancient tradiisiúnta a thugtaí chogan na saoirse. Ach an raibh mór an tionachar ag scéal Barry na sealadigh.
When you read about people like Tom Barry and indeed many others, Pádraig Pearse and James Connolly, these people, quite clearly were an inspiration to us. But the driving force for us was the conditions that we were living under.
Ach cá hasab Barry choin tú ine an chéiste. Le Sinn Féin sa tanól is an túisgart fós, sa riocht déantathe.
Tá bheiceadh sé éarnig a trid in aige chéile, agus buamáil fiús an nóchadaí is tólam nábeach sé sásta lei sin agus bhfuil seansán go dé bhóg sé leis an ggóin tú.
I would like to think that he would be supportive, but maybe he wouldn't be. But, you know, if someone was to come and say to me that they knew for definite that Tom Barry would be opposed to what I am doing, would that make me change my mind? No, it wouldn't.
I'm as positive as day follows night and night follows day and that rivers flow, that you'll never have peace in this country until the British Army and its administration in the Six Counties is shifted. I'm not one of these that believe that war is a glorious thing. There's nothing romantic about war. The only war which I can justify to myself is a war of liberation.
Agus I teachn se hagan leanna an sreise bunithe sí leabhar a scríbú faoi le chro chagan na saoirse